Hello there, everyone. Robert Ferringo back once again with my next team on my NFL Power Rankings countdown. Today we're at number 14, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seattle Seahawks being ranked number 14 heading into this season is kind of the perfect example of the beauty of the NFL. Last year at this time in my Power Rankings, I think I had them as one of the 4 worst teams in the NFL. What did they do? Well, they made the playoffs, of course. And now heading into this season, they have an exciting young core of talent, and they really could be on the verge of another 4 or 5 year run or window, if you will, that may be Pete Carroll's swan song in coaching. Pete Carroll, when you add up what he's done in college and the NFL, has been one of the best American football coaches of the last 40 years, without question. He's done fantastic work with Seattle, and he has built a team that its youth is both its strength and its weakness coming into this season. A lot of young, exciting talent, a lot of athleticism on both sides of the ball, but not a lot of experience, not a lot of proven track record. So how that plays out is going to be kind of the determinant of whether Seattle over or underachieves compared to my rankings this year. Now, it starts with Geno Smith, who, again, to credit Pete Carroll, right? Look at what happened to Russell Wilson when he left Pete Carroll. All right, and maybe you don't want to say, oh, that wasn't all Pete Carroll. That was just what was going on with Denver and bad coaching or whatever. Okay, maybe. But then when you also consider that Russell Wilson, future Hall of Famer Russell Wilson, completely fell apart the first year he was away from Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll also brought in Geno Smith, pulled him off the scrap heap, and turned him into the comeback player of the year and a legitimate NFL starter. I mean, what does that tell you about the guy and his program and his system and just what a fantastic coach Carroll is? Now, was that a fluke from Geno Smith? Is he going to turn back into a pumpkin this year? I don't know. I don't think so. Geno Smith is an example of one of the things I've talked about consistently this offseason, in that teams are rushing quarterbacks into starting jobs way too early. They're playing rookie quarterbacks way too much. It's making the NFL a worse product. It's hurting quarterbacks' developments. You take a guy like Geno Smith, who, yeah, he's bounced around a bit, but he was started too early. He was thrown to the fire in New York. The guy had talent coming out of college. There was no question about that. But he was given too much too soon by a bad organization in the Jets, one of the worst organizations in all of North American sports, really. Now he's a little older, a little more mature, a little wiser, a little more capable of handling all the stuff that's thrown to him. And, hey, Pete Carroll got the best out of him. I think that's going to continue. I think Seattle's offense has a chance to be very good. Now, they need Ken Walker back. He was a revelation last year, rushing for over 1,000 yards in just 11 starts, 15 appearances, 11 starts, over 1,000 yards. They need him to bounce back healthy. But Seattle always runs the ball. Carroll teams are always built around the run. Last year, Seattle was number 3 in rushing attempts, yards per carry, and rushing yards overall. They're going to run the ball. They have always found guys. The joke used to be about the Denver Broncos running backs. Like every year they just have a random dude that they pulled off the street seemingly, and he'd rush for 1,000 yards. I feel like that's been Seattle. Fantasy football players know what I'm talking about. Like, each of the last 6 or 7 years, it's like a different guy. Since Marshawn Lynch has been gone, it's been like a different guy every year that's carrying the load and putting up numbers out in Seattle. So they're going to run the ball. The offensive line is young. Doesn't matter. They're going to be tested because Carroll's teams are going to run the ball. Their receiving core might be the best in the NFL. If it's not, it's one of the top 4 or 5. DK Metcalf is an absolute beast. He is just a beast of a human being. Tyler Lockett might not be what he was 4 years ago. He's still crafty. He's still a veteran. He can still get open. He will still catch nearly everything thrown in his area. And then, oh, by the way, they invested a first-round pick in another just absolute animal from Ohio State. So now they have three legit, and they have Noah Fant and Will Disley, a nice 1-2 punch at tight end. So they get a lot of receiving options for Geno Smith to go to. They are going to run the ball. Doesn't matter who's carrying it. This offense has a chance to be one of the best in the NFC. It might need to be, because the defense last year was a horror show. I don't know how they made the playoffs with a defense as bad as it was last year. They were what? They were number 25 in scoring defense, number 26 in total defense. And if you watched Seattle play, any stop that their defense got was almost purely accidental. You know, it was the result of a penalty on the offense or just poor execution, a missed throw, something like that. It very rarely was from Seattle defenders making plays. The Seahawks did invest. They got Draymond Jones was their big free agent signing, prying him away from Denver. And they brought back Bobby Wagner, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's on the back end of his career, but he still had over 100 tackles for the Rams last year. He went on sabbatical, basically spent his whole time in Seattle, went to Los Angeles thinking that they were going to compete for another championship. Didn't work out. Came back to Seattle to finish his career. His leadership, his tackling ability is going to pay big dividends immediately and solidify that linebacking group. If they can get absolutely anything out of Devin Bush, another former top pick from the Pittsburgh Steelers, or by the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they can get absolutely anything out of him, that front seven, those three guys might be able to turn this front seven around a little bit. They used their number one pick on the cornerback, Devin Witherspoon. They had two rookies last year in the secondary that both performed very, very well. Again, young, rookies, first and second year guys. That's kind of the theme throughout this roster. Last year it worked for them. Whether or not it was a fluke, it was an accident, it was Carroll's genius, whatever you want to call it. It worked last year. A lot of the same guys are back this year. A lot of talent here. They're still not better than San Francisco, but they benefit from being in the same division as the Rams and Cardinals, two teams that are in full-blown, full-bore rebuilding mode. So it's not going to be easy this year. The season win total is set at 8.5. I wouldn't touch this one. I won't touch this one. I won't bet a single dollar on this. I think that's a really good number. It's right around where I have this Seattle team. Now, go back to one of my favorite stats. I've mentioned it at least a dozen times in these videos. Half the teams that make the playoffs one year don't make it the next year in the NFL. That's like a 30-year trend throughout the league. So when I'm looking at playoff teams from last season, who made it, who might not this year, I think Seattle's one of those teams. Love the talent, love Carroll. They've made the playoffs 9 times in the last 11 years. They've had a winning record 10 of the last 11 years. So I know I might end up on the wrong side of this one, frankly, if history is going to be our gauge here. But I guess I can see him covering the 8.5, maybe getting to 9 wins, but not making the postseason. I guess if you're going to be wrong about this one, it better be to be wrong betting on Carroll's track record. I can see him getting back to 9 wins. I would take the over here, and I think this is going to be a really interesting and dangerous team in the NFC. So that's it for today. Be sure to check back tomorrow. In the meantime, carpe diem, and good luck.